I was wrong about my daughter-in-law from the beginning. Not wrong in a way you might think. I didn't misjudge her character. I saw exactly who she was. The first time my son brought her home. I was wrong because I thought it didn't matter. I thought love would smooth it over. I thought I was patient enough for both of them. I wasn't. Her name is Gwendolyn. She goes by Gwen. She has one of those smiles that looks genuine until you've seen it enough times to notice it. Never quite reaches her eyes. My son Marty met her at a conference in Denver about 6 years ago. He called me that same night, more excited than I'd heard him since he made varsity baseball in high school. I remember standing in my kitchen, stirring a pot of soup I was making for one, and thinking, this is it. This is the one. I wanted so badly to be right about that. My wife, Patricia. No, I can't use that name. My wife, I'll just call her my wife. She passed 14 months before that Denver conference, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. 11 weeks is not enough time to say goodbye to someone you've spent 34 years building a life with. There's no amount of time that's enough for that. But 11 weeks is especially cruel. You spend the first few in denial, the middle ones in hospitals, the last ones just trying to hold her hand and not fall apart in front of her because she was always the stronger one and you don't want her last memory of you to be you breaking down. So when Marty called from Denver, I was happy for him. Genuinely, a father's happiness, which is a specific kind, part pride, part relief, part something that almost hurts because you love them so much, it's almost too much to hold. Gwen came to Thanksgiving that first year. She sat across from me at the table. My wife and I had bought at an estate sale in 1987, and she looked around our house the way people look at things they're already planning to replace. I noticed it. I told myself I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. She was polite, asked questions, helped clear the dishes. But there was something in the way she talked about her own family, her father's vacation house in Hilton Head, her sister's kitchen renovation, the cruise she and Marty were apparently already planning, that told me she was keeping score in a game I hadn't agreed to play. Marty, for his part, was completely gone on her, and she did seem to love him. I want to be fair. I think she loved him in whatever way she was capable of loving, but loving someone and respecting their family are two different things. And Gwen made it clear, in dozens of small ways, that she didn't particularly think my side of the equation was worth her time. I'm not flashy. Never have been. I drove a 9 Tacoma until 2 years ago when I finally traded it in. Not because I needed to, but because the AC gave out and I'm too old for that kind of suffering. I wore the same 3 pairs of work boots on rotation for almost a decade. My house, the one Marty grew up in, the one my wife picked the paint colors for, is a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing special from the outside. Inside, it's full of 30 years of life. Bookshelves my wife and I built together one rainy weekend, a kitchen where I taught Marty to make his grandfather's chili. A backyard where we put in a garden the year my wife got sick, because she wanted tomatoes. And I would have built her the moon if she'd asked. Gwen saw old furniture and outdated countertops. She didn't say it outright. She was too smart for that. But she suggested renovations constantly, mentioned casually that Marty's old bedroom had potential, asked once, at Easter dinner, if I'd ever thought about downsizing. I was 63 years old. My wife had been gone less than 2 years, and my daughter-in-law was suggesting I might want to think about a smaller place. I didn't say anything. I just passed the green beans. Marty and Gwen got married the following spring. Small ceremony, which I appreciated. I gave a toast that made Marty cry, which I'll count as a win. I danced with Gwen at the reception. I was trying. I want that on the record. I was trying. The first year of their marriage was fine. The second year was when the requests started. Small things at first. Could I wash their dog for a week while they went to Cabo? Could I help them move some furniture? Could I co-sign a car loan? Not because Marty's credit was bad, but because it would get them a better rate. I helped. Every time I helped, I'm his father. That's what fathers do. The ask that changed things came on a Thursday evening. Marty called and said they wanted to come over for dinner on Sunday, that they wanted to talk about something. His voice had that careful quality, the one he gets when he's been coached on what to say. I recognized it from the time Gwen had convinced him to ask me for money for a kitchen renovation, their kitchen, not mine, because it would add to the property value. I cooked. Pot roast. Because it's what I make when I need to keep my hands busy and my mouth quiet. They arrived at 6. Gwen had brought a bottle of wine, which she opened and poured without asking. We sat down to eat. About halfway through the meal, Marty set down his fork. He had the look of a man who had rehearsed something and was now second-guessing whether rehearsing had helped. "Dad," he said, "we've been thinking." Gwen jumped in before he could finish. "She's good at that." "We've been thinking about your situation," she said. "Now that you're on your own, this house is a lot to manage. And with your knee the way it is." "My knee is fine," I said. "It's a lot of yard," Marty said. He was looking at the table. "I've managed this yard for 30 years, I said. Gwen smiled that smile. "We found some really wonderful communities," she said. "Not nursing homes. I want to be clear about that. Active senior living. They have pools. Pickleball." She said pickleball the way people say it when they don't actually think pickleball is interesting, but they've read that old people like it. "We could look at a few together, just look." I took a bite of pot roast. I chewed slowly. I looked at my son, who was still looking at the table. I looked at my daughter-in-law, who was watching me with that smile. Then I looked at the bookshelves in the hallway behind her, the ones my wife and I built, the ones with the picture of Marty at age 7 on the middle shelf, gap-toothed and sunburned, holding up a fish he caught at my father's pond. "I'll think about it," I said. I had no intention of thinking about it, but something else happened that night. Something that had nothing to do with senior living communities or pickleball. After dinner, Gwen excused herself to use the bathroom, and Marty and I sat alone at the table for the first time in a while. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She means well, Dad." I looked at my son who was sitting in a chair his mother used to sit in a house I built a life in, telling me his wife meant well. "I know," I said. But the next morning, I made a phone call, not to any senior living community, to my attorney, a man named Alan Rice, who I've known since before Marty was born. We played softball together in the 90s. He's represented me for decades. I told him I wanted to review everything, my will, my trust, the titles on the property, everything. "Something happened?" he asked. "Just being careful," I said. Alan knew me well enough not to push. We scheduled a meeting for the following week. Now, here's the part I haven't explained yet, because it didn't seem relevant until it suddenly very much did. I'm not rich in the way rich people look rich. I never drove a fancy car. I never wore a watch that cost more than $100. I bought my clothes at Tractor Supply and the occasional Costco run. My wife and I lived below our means for 30 years, not because we had to, but because we believed in it. Her parents lost everything in a bad investment when she was a teenager, and it marked her. It marked me too, by extension. We saved, we invested quietly. We said no to a lot of things that looked good in the short term. What most people don't know, what Gwen definitely didn't know, and what Marty only knew in the vague way adult children know things they've never had to think hard about, is that 22 years ago, I held a small patent on a manufacturing process, a specific valve assembly used in commercial HVAC systems. It sounds boring because it is boring. The engineering is not glamorous. But that patent generated licensing revenue for over 15 years, and I reinvested almost all of it, quietly, into index funds, into a commercial property on the east side of Columbus that I bought cheap and held, into a few things that compounded in ways that would have surprised even me if I hadn't been watching the statements every quarter. I also own the building my son's dental practice operates out of. He knows this. He's always known this. He pays below market rent, has for 9 years, and I've never once brought it up or made him feel indebted. It was a gift I gave quietly, the way I tried to give most things. What I'm saying is this. I was not a man who needed to move into a senior living community to save money. I was a man who lived like he might, because that's how I was raised, and because I felt honest, and because my wife liked our house, and I saw no reason to leave it just because she was gone. Alan and I sat in his office for 2 hours. I told him what had happened at dinner. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always appreciated about him. When I finished, he looked at me over his glasses and said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to make sure everything is protected," I said. "And I want to make sure Marty understands what he has, even if he doesn't know it yet." You restructured the trust. The commercial property went into an LLC. The will was updated. I'm not going to share the specifics because they're not the point. The point is that I spent that afternoon making sure that everything I'd built over a lifetime was organized in a way that reflected what I actually valued, not what someone else assumed I had. I felt better when I left. Clearer. The Sunday dinners continued. So did the suggestions. Gwen started forwarding me real estate listings. Condos, mostly. She'd text them with notes like, "This one has great light," or "so much easier to maintain." I looked at each one and did not respond. Marty would call a day or two later and ask if I'd seen what Gwen sent. I'd say yes. He'd ask what I thought. I'd say I was still thinking. Months went by like that. Then, in late October, they invited me to Thanksgiving at their place. Their house is nice. Gwen has good taste and money to act on it. The kitchen is the one she renovated with help from me, though that conversation has apparently been revised in the family memory into the kitchen we redid ourselves. Fine. I sat at a marble island that I'd contributed to and ate appetizers that Gwen had ordered from a catering company, and I thought about my wife's cooking, and I thought about the Thanksgiving table in my own house, and I missed her so much it felt like a physical thing sitting on my chest. Their daughter, my granddaughter. She's 9, her name is June, and she is the best thing either of them has ever done. Came and sat next to me while the adults were doing adult things. She leaned against my arm. She smelled like kid shampoo. "Grandpa," she said, "are you going to sell your house?" "No," I said. "Good," she said. "I like your house. It smells like Grandma." I had to look away for a second. Blinked at the window. Took a breath. "Yeah," I said. "It does." At dinner, the conversation eventually turned to the new year. Plans, investments. Gwen's brother, who I'd met a handful of times, mentioned he was moving to Scottsdale. Her mother, who was visiting from Charlotte, talked about her portfolio. I listened. I ate. Gwen's brother at some point said something to Marty about rental income, and Marty said something vague about the building on the east side of Columbus. Gwen looked at me sharply. "What building?" she asked. Marty said, "Dad's rental property." "You have a rental property," Gwen said. I looked at her. "Yes," I said. "In Columbus?" "Yes." She waited, clearly expecting more. I took a sip of wine and did not provide more. I watched her recalibrate. It was subtle, but I saw it. Like a ship adjusting its heading. She smiled. Differently this time, more deliberate. Asked a few more questions that I answered simply. The dinner moved on, but something had shifted. In the weeks after Thanksgiving, the pressure about the house stopped. The condo listings dried up. Gwen started calling me more. Not a lot. She's not a warm person by nature, but more than before. Asked how I was doing. Asked about the property. Asked once, in a way that she clearly thought was casual, whether I had a property manager or handled things myself. I handled things myself. December, Marty called and mentioned they were thinking about expanding. A bigger house, better school district for June. He said they were wondering if I might want to invest. As a partner, he said. Like it was a business proposition. I told him I'd think about it. I called Alan the next day. We had another conversation. I updated a few more things. January came. I'm not going to be coy about what happened in January, because it's the thing that closed the loop on all of this, and it happened in a way I never anticipated. Marty and Gwen came over for dinner. First time they'd been to my house since the pot roast. I cooked chicken, nothing fancy, and we sat at the same table. June was with Gwen's parents. It was just the three of us. Partway through the meal, Gwen brought up the property again. Then she brought up the patent. She'd apparently done some research in the months since Thanksgiving, connected some dots I hadn't expected her to connect, and she asked, directly, whether I had other assets I hadn't mentioned. I looked at my son. Marty had the grace to look uncomfortable. He wasn't a bad man. I want to say that clearly. He was a man who loved his wife and wanted things to be smooth, and had convinced himself that smoothing things over was the same as making things right. Those are different things. But he wasn't bad. Dad, he started. It's a fair question, Gwen said. She had set down her fork. She was using her professional voice, the one she uses in her real estate work. We're family. We should be on the same page. We are on the same page, I said. I live in my house. I have for 30 years. That's the page we're on. We're concerned, she said, about planning. About what happens if something happens to you. About whether there's a plan in place. There's a plan in place, I said. We'd like to be part of that conversation, she said. I looked at her. I thought about June, pressing against my arm at Thanksgiving, telling me she liked my house because it smelled like her grandmother. You are part of that conversation, I said. You just don't know what's being said yet. There was a silence. Gwen didn't know what to do with that. Neither did Marty. I pushed back my chair, carried my plate to the kitchen, and when I came back, I said I was tired and thanked them for coming. They left 20 minutes later. Gwen's face was closed off in a way that told me she was going to be thinking about that sentence for a while. So was I. 3 weeks later, I had lunch with Alan, and we finalized everything. The trust, the property, the remaining licensing income from a secondary patent I'd never gotten around to telling anyone about. Everything. Organized, documented, and in place. Then I called Marty. Just him, not on speakerphone. I asked him to come over the following Saturday, alone. He hesitated. I could hear him checking with Gwen, hand over the phone, then said he would. He came. We sat at the kitchen table with coffee. I told him I loved him. I told him I'd been thinking a lot about his mother, and about what she would have wanted, and that she would have wanted things to be clear, and fair, and right. I told him that I'd restructured my estate, and that he should know the general shape of things, not the details yet, but enough. I told him that the building he'd been practicing dentistry out of for 9 years below market rent, that was already in his name, had been for 3 years. I'd done it quietly when I updated the original trust and hadn't mentioned it because I didn't want gratitude. I wanted him to have it. He went very still. I told him June was set up through a separate education trust that would cover college, and then some. Had been since she was born. He looked at the table. Then he looked up at me and his eyes were wet, and he said, "Dad, why didn't you tell us?" "Because it wasn't about telling," I said. "It was about doing." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Gwen doesn't know about any of this." "No," I said. "She's going to be upset," he said. "That you didn't." "That's okay," I said. "That's between you and Gwen." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded, slow, like something was settling in him. "She's been pushing me," he said quietly, "about the house, about what you might have. I want you to know I didn't want to push you." "I know," I said. "You're a good man, Marty. You got turned around for a while, that happens." We sat there a while longer. He helped me finish the coffee. We talked about June, about baseball, about nothing important. It felt like the first normal conversation we'd had in over a year. He left around 2. I stood on the porch and watched him pull out of the driveway, and I thought about his mother, and I thought about how she used to say that the thing about doing something right is you never have to explain it later. I walked back inside. The house was quiet. The bookshelves were there. The picture of Marty at 7 was there. The garden out back, overgrown now in January, but still there, still waiting for spring. I made another pot of coffee. I thought about my wife. I thought about all the years we'd spent building something that looked, from the outside, like not very much, and how much it actually was. How we'd known it was and been fine with only the 2 of us knowing. Gwen and Marty had a hard conversation that evening. I don't know the specifics. I know because Marty called me the following Tuesday, early morning, and said that things were going to be different going forward. He said it simply and clearly, and I believed him. June called me that same week. She does that sometimes. Calls from her little tablet, face too close to the camera so I can see mostly her forehead and one eye. She said her dad had told her she was going to be able to go to any college she wanted when she grew up. "Did he tell you why?" I asked. "He said you did it," she said. "He said you did it a long time ago and didn't tell anyone." "Does that make sense to you?" I asked. She thought about it with the serious face she makes when she's actually thinking. "Yeah," she said. "It's like when I clean my room without being asked." The point is that the room is clean, not that I get credit. I laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in what felt like months. "That's exactly right," I said. "That's exactly it." She showed me her hamster for a few minutes and then said she had to go. I said goodbye. I sat in my kitchen, in my house, at my table, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something close to peace. Not because everything had worked out perfectly. Gwen and I may never be warm with each other. Marty and I still have work to do. Grief doesn't go away because you stay busy and organized and careful. My wife's absence is still the biggest fact of my life. But I had done the thing she would have done. I had made things right without making a scene. I had protected what mattered. Not the money, not the property, not the patent or the trust documents, but June and Marty. And whatever chance they had to build something real, the house still smells like her. Faintly and less every year, but still, it's enough. For now, it's enough. I'm not going anywhere. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened. Not just the dinner, not just Gwen's questions, not just the look on Marty's face when he realized how much he hadn't known. I've had time to think about the whole shape of it. The years before and the months after. And what I keep coming back to is something that has nothing to do with money or property or patent filings. It has to do with the kind of person you decide to be when nobody's watching. Gwen made a calculation. I understand it, even if I don't respect it. She looked at an older man living alone in an aging house driving an old truck, wearing work boots that had seen better days. And she decided what that meant. She decided it quickly, the way people do when they're not really looking at the person in front of them. They're looking at what they can learn from the surface and filling in the rest themselves. The problem with that kind of thinking is that it's lazy, and lazy thinking over time will cost you. Not because the universe is keeping score, because you stop seeing clearly. And when you stop seeing clearly, you make decisions based on things that aren't true. That's what happened to her. She built a whole strategy around a version of me that didn't exist. Marty got turned around as I told him. He's not a bad man. He was just caught between two things he loved, and he chose the path of least resistance for too long. Most of us do that at some point. The question isn't whether you lose your footing. The question is what you do when you notice you have. He noticed. He called me on a Tuesday morning and said things were going to be different. I believed him. I still do. June didn't calculate anything. She sat next to me at Thanksgiving and leaned against my arm and told me she liked my house because it smelled like her grandmother. She wasn't trying to get anything. She wasn't positioning herself. She was just being honest, the way children are before the world teaches them not to be. That's worth protecting. That's what I was actually doing with the trust, with the education fund, with all the quiet restructuring. I was protecting that, not the money. Her. I spent a lot of years watching my wife do things for people without ever announcing she'd done them. Pay a neighbor's electric bill when times were hard, leave meals on a porch without knocking, set up a savings account for a cousin who was struggling and never mention it once. I used to ask her why she didn't let people know. She'd say the same thing every time. If you're doing it to be thanked, you're doing it for yourself. I think about that a lot. The intelligence in what I did wasn't financial. It was about understanding what actually mattered and acting on that understanding consistently, over years, without fanfare. Discipline is not dramatic. It doesn't make for good stories at dinner parties. But it builds things that last. Things that are still standing when everything else shifts. I'm not going to pretend the situation with Gwen is resolved. Warm is probably not something we'll ever be. There are conversations ahead that I'm not looking forward to. But the foundation is solid. Marty knows it. June will grow up knowing it. And whatever comes next, they have something real under their feet. That's enough. When you've done the work honestly and quietly and well, that really is enough.